That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, so yesterday we went through and we looked at the best pick in every single round of a Dynasty startup draft. Now we're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to be looking at that same draft and we are going to go round by round, and I'm going to choose my least favorite selection, what I perceive to be the worst pick in each round, players that I'm going to be avoiding. But of course, I am sorry if I choose your pick. I'm going to have a couple of my own picks at the end of the draft. I think I've made some pretty bad selections in this startup draft that I'm going to be happy to share my thoughts on and why I perceive them to be mistakes that I made. But of course, before we get into it, please go down there, drop that like, leave a comment letting me know how stupid I am. Leave a comment if you think that I got something wrong in this video. Subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football and you really want to become a better player, make sure you go to flockfantasy.com. Go get our Dynasty research book, well over 100 pages. Go pre-order our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide. There you're going to find so much information on historical hit rates with rookies based on position of the draft you are in, based on, position you're going for, whether it's wide receiver, whether it's running back, tight end, quarterback, who you should be drafting. You're going to learn about age cliffs with production and value. You're going to learn about adjusting to your league format with super flex, with tight end premium. You're going to learn how to know if you're a rebuilder. There's so much over there. Please go check that out. And if you don't want to purchase that on flockfantasy.com, you can take advantage of a deal that helps the channel just as much and is a lot cheaper for you. Please go and just make a $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy. I know y'all have seen me getting a ton of drafts going on Underdog Fantasy. You can hop into drafts with me on the live stream. You can go get into your own drafts with people in the public lobby. Go draft with your friends. And when you make a $10 deposit with Underdog Fantasy, they will give you our Dynasty research book for free. They will match your deposit dollar for dollar up to $100, and you will get our Dynasty rankings and our Dynasty rookie rankings up to date for a month. So please take advantage of that. Should be it. Let's go round one. Dak Prescott. Here with Dak Prescott, I think that this is a quarterback that we need to change the perception of how we view him in Dynasty. Because this is a player that, no, I'm not worried about his age. Of course, he's been around for quite a while, but as I talk about all the time, I can't be saying, oh yeah, I'm fine going and drafting Russell Wilson. I'm fine going and drafting Matthew Stafford, not worried about their age when Stafford is 34. How old is Dak at this point? Going to be 29 this upcoming season. No, that's not why I'm worried about Dak Prescott. Why I'm worried about Dak Prescott is the expectation for this Dallas Cowboys offense to take a step back this upcoming season. And why I would say this is if you look at the contracts they have given to Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott, you see that this team no longer has the resources that they can pour into the offensive line, that they can pour into the wide receiver core, having Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup all on the same roster. The supporting cast here for Dak Prescott this upcoming season may be worse than what he has had over the past 3 to 4 seasons. Now, what we need to do is we need to combine this with what we have seen from Dak Prescott as a rusher. Because if we remember, Dak Prescott at the beginning of his career, did provide you some production on the ground in fantasy football. If we were looking at this, 282, 357, 306, 277 rushing yards through the first 4 years of his NFL career. You combine that with him getting to 6 rushing touchdowns every single season. That's a total of 66 fantasy points added on just based on what he's providing you on the ground. If we go through and look at what 66 fantasy points based on that rushing production is with passing yards, it's over 1,600 passing yards that he was adding on with his ability on the ground. Now, what we saw this past year is Dak Prescott's no longer going to run. Dak Prescott now falls in the range of a Matthew Stafford, of an Aaron Rodgers, of a Tom Brady, where this is a quarterback that, yeah, you can still draft him in fantasy, but he doesn't have the same ceiling that you would see from Kyler, from Lamar, from Deshaun Watson, from Justin Herbert, Mahomes, Allen, these guys that will pick up over 300 rushing yards and have the potential to go out there and get 6+ rushing touchdowns as well. So I'm worried about Dak that now he is just a prototypical pocket passing quarterback option that if you were drafting him in the first round, you're essentially betting, hell, with Dak Prescott, he can lead the NFL in passing yards yet again, but he is going to have the worst supporting cast that we have seen him have in Dallas for a very long time now. So I don't like the pick of Dak at the 111. Now, I will say, if we combine this with the fact that you knew you wanted to go CeeDee Lamb at the 202 and you wanted to create that stack, then sure, I'm fine with it. Then if you want to have that top end stack with the elite quarterback and the elite wide receiver, I can understand taking Dak Prescott at the 111. Really, there are no bad picks in the first round. Of course, I'm just trying to find the smallest reason to try to pick a loser in this round. In reality, every pick in the first is a good one. Now, going into the second round, here, I'm going to go Christian McCaffrey, and this is something that I probably have to look at my own dynasty rankings with. I probably have to go and take a real hard look at it, because with CMC, I'm fine drafting him in redraft. In redraft, he's my 102, and with McCaffrey, this is a younger player at the same time. I think people would be surprised to see that he's only 25 years old. Drafted in 2017, the same class as Fournette, as Dalvin Cook, etc. Now, my issue with drafting Christian McCaffrey is the downside that you have with this pick. Now, of course, he is at a higher risk for injury than pretty much any other player in this range of the draft. And I am willing to admit that in a redraft league. Like, if you're going over to Underdog Fantasy and you're going to draft with me in one of those live streams, you will see that I'm fine drafting McCaffrey at the 102 in one of those leagues. Because what's the downside? The downside in a redraft format, you draft Christian McCaffrey at the 102. He has an ankle sprain. He has a hamstring strain. He has a groin strain. And all of a sudden, he misses 10 plus games of the season. Well, you lose your league, but you lose that buy-in, and you took a shot on an elite level ceiling. However, in Dynasty, the downside's a little bit worse, because if McCaffrey does miss a significant portion of this upcoming season based on his injury, we have to ask ourselves, what happens to his value? I feel like we are at the final point where if McCaffrey were to be injured this upcoming season, there's not a floor on where his value can go. I think you could see him literally be worth 25% of what he currently is next offseason if he goes out there and has yet again another injury-riddled season. And the risk on a dynasty selection in the second round is just significantly higher with that profile than what you'd see in a redraft format, because hell, next year you're drafting a new team. So who the hell cares? Go take a shot on that elite level ceiling. And McCaffrey has the highest ceiling of any player in the second round. But so far this offseason, I have found that I haven't even considered drafting Christian McCaffrey in a single league in Dynasty. Redraft, sign me up. I'm willing to take on that risk. Dynasty, it's a little tougher. Now, going over to our third round, we're going to go with Dalvin Cook. Now, Dalvin Cook did go at the end of the third round, so it was a smaller investment than what we had with some of the other players on the board. But with Dalvin, my issue is this is a running back that you're essentially drafting for the next 3 years. If y'all were able to read our Dynasty research book, y'all have seen by now that I came away with the conclusion that while, yes, we have not seen in a very long time a running back be able to maintain their dynasty value, or a running back be able to maintain their production after 27 years old. That has been a crazy fall off. But we went even further back in that dynasty research book. We went and gave some context. We looked at years, 15 seasons ago, and kind of realized that the running back landscape looked very differently. And we came away with the conclusion that it probably is just small sample variance in why we haven't had productive running backs at age 27, 28, 29 in recent history. And the reason for this is obviously the elite 2017 class coming out and taking jobs away from every veteran running back, combined with the fact that if you look at the running back draft classes in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2012, 2011, they were laughably bad. So that's why we haven't seen these productive veteran running backs. So I was originally saying fade Dalvin Cook, fade Alvin Kamara, fade all these guys at the beginning of the offseason. I'm fine drafting the veterans now. But what we need to look at is Dalvin Cook in his projection this upcoming season for the production that he should provide, and ask ourselves, does the opportunity cost make sense here? Because you are taking Dalvin Cook over some cornerstone assets. You're taking Dalvin Cook over DK Metcalf. You're taking Dalvin over Stephon Diggs. Whereas you could get Leonard Fournette later on. Leonard Fournette went at the 903. The next best wide receiver off the board was Cortland Sutton. And should the gap between Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette be that massive this upcoming year? They're the same age. They're both drafted in 2017. So I think by default, I hate the idea of reaching on these veteran running backs early when we can get guys like Leonard Fournette and James Conner a lot later at a much better deal. Now, let's go over to the 4th round. We're going to go with the first player in the 4th round here. We're going to go with Treylon Burks. Now, with Treylon Burks, we recently moved him down our wide receiver rankings. Nothing against his overall profile. Just once we created our wide receiver prospect model and really fine-tuned that, it just made someone like Drake London, it made Garrett Wilson really just pop off the screen with how impressive their profiles are. So I'm not obviously just dogging this for the fact that he goes before Garrett Wilson, he goes before Drake London. But here, you had Treylon Burks going before a lot of wide receivers that I ranked higher than him. I have Stephon Diggs, Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, and Drake London all ranked before Treylon Burks. To take Burks at the 401 here, obviously, Girthquake does this. This was Noah. Noah was trading like a madman. Noah, literally, if you look at his draft picks, he selected in the first 16 rounds 4 players from his original picks. He was trading around everywhere. This was one of those selections I just couldn't get behind with Treylon Burks. Even though he's a great player, I just think some of the other wide receivers on the board were a little bit better. Now, going over to the 5th round, we are going to be looking at Pat Freimuth. Speaking of just better options at the position later on, here you're taking Freimuth over some cornerstone assets. You're taking him over David Montgomery, over Travis Etienne, over Elijah Moore, over Tua Tagovailoa. And here with Pat Freimuth, as we've said, if you look at the volume in Pittsburgh, I think that he should be a winner this upcoming offseason based on Juju Smith-Schuster going to Kansas City, based on possibly them getting a quarterback upgrade over Ben Roethlisberger with how bad Big Ben was last year. And Freimuth was an extremely impressive rookie tight end. But if we're looking at him compared to someone like Irv Smith Jr., if we're looking at him compared to someone like Cole Kmet, where they're all pretty much the same age, Cole Kmet's younger than Freimuth, and we look at the volume that they had last season, Cole Kmet was very similar in terms of the targets per game, and he had a much higher target share than what Freimuth did. Now, of course, Freimuth had the usage in the red zone. Freimuth came away with the receiving touchdowns, and his points per game was significantly better because of so, and he looked like a much better tight end option. But we know that we want to chase volume. And if we look at Cole Kmet in Chicago right now, hell, Cole Kmet is competing for Darnell Mooney, and that's it. And I don't think we can sit here and say, as of today, that Mitchell Trubisky and this Pittsburgh Steelers offense should have way more passing volume than what we're expecting in Chicago. So I think this really goes back to our Dynasty research book, seeing that at the tight end position in a tight end premium format, reaching on these guys in the middle rounds historically has been a very bad bet. I think you either want to grab one of those elite guys like Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle, or you want to wait. I don't think we should be reaching on someone like Pat Freimuth at the 5'10". And now going over to our 6th round here, we're going to be looking at Isaiah Spiller that goes at the 6'10", right after Josh Jacobs, right before Elijah Mitchell, Ezekiel Elliott. Now, if you look at the running backs that Isaiah Spiller goes before, I'm not going to have any massive complaints. Now, I personally would prefer Elijah Mitchell. I personally would prefer someone like Aaron Jones. But I understand, especially at the time of this draft, I mean, keep in mind, Isaiah Spiller, I do see the positives. I mean, if he were to hit his projections with his size, with his speed that you had coming into this offseason, if he were to still go in the top 40 picks of the NFL draft like most mock drafters had him, I mean, trust me, I'd be drooling over Isaiah Spiller with this selection. But as we've talked about it time and time again, based on the red flags that have popped up this offseason, I think we have to dramatically move him down. And my issue is I just don't like any of the running backs in this range. I think going with someone like Mike Evans, going with Jerry Jeudy, Amara St. Brown, Keenan Allen, they were all significantly better values. So I really don't like the Isaiah Spiller selection at the 6'10". And then speaking of these running backs in this range just being overvalued, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be another example of this at the 703. Now, this was before Ronald Jones was signed. This was a startup before Rojo came into Kansas City, so I doubt that he would have gone this high in this draft. But overall, I think here, this team decided to take those elite level wide receivers early, so they were in a position where they felt like they needed to get running backs here in the middle rounds. But in reality, I don't necessarily think that this was where the value was. They actually had a fantastic pick later on in the draft where they got Leonard Fournette at the 903. I think they would have been much better off continuing to double down with the wide receiver position in those value rounds, in rounds 6 and 7. Like if they would have gone with a combination of Mike Evans and Keenan Allen here over Isaiah Spiller and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I would have loved that. Now, going into round 8, we're going to stick it with the running back position. Still, these are where those wide receivers were valued. And here we have Miles Sanders at the 803. I'd prefer a couple other players. I'd probably prefer Brady. I'd probably prefer Tannehill. And obviously, those wide receivers that we have previously mentioned. The issue with Miles Sanders is I just don't necessarily see the access to the elite level ceiling that you would have from someone like Leonard Fournette, James Conner later. Now with Miles Sanders also, he doesn't have that long-term job security that I could get excited about. Trust me, I love Sanders in the 2019 draft class. I was too high on Miles Sanders. I've gotten Miles Sanders wrong in the past. It is what it is. I think that we probably just should continue to go wide receivers in these middle rounds. And going into round 9, this is where we just take a dip back into the tight end position. Zach Ertz going at the 9-11. So this is at the very end of the draft room. So, of course, you can't be comparing Zach Ertz to someone like Leonard Fournette in the same round because this team didn't have the option to go with Leonard Fournette, didn't have the option to go with Brandon Ayuk, but they did have the option to go with another one of these wide receivers in Kadarius Toney, in Rashad Bateman. And with Zach Ertz, we just have to ask ourselves, like, from a points per game perspective, exactly what is he giving us this upcoming season that we couldn't get from David Njoku at the 14-15 turn? What is he giving us that we couldn't get from Irv Smith Jr.? Is it that truly elite level upgrade? Because clearly Zach Ertz is a player that his dynasty value is only going to be going down every single week going forward. And I just think you're passing on cornerstone wide receiver options. Like Rashad Bateman could outscore him on a per game basis this upcoming year. There's not really, a lack of tight ends when you get Logan Thomas in the 19th. I'm just going to continue to take the receiver value in this round. But going over to round 10, we are going to have another tight end on the board. I really hope everybody goes out there and reads that Dynasty research book and how we have proven that really, even in a tight end premium format, you shouldn't think that you can go out there and flex a tight end. You should still be planning on flexing those wide receivers. And here we have Noah Fant at the 1003. Now, trust me, if this was before the trade, I would have been all in on Noah Fant at the 1003. I'd have been like, oh my God, look at his first 3 years. This is a tight end that was a great prospect in that 2019 draft class. An elite level athlete, has the size, looks like he is pretty much a Kyle Pitts level player in terms of how he is used as a receiving option rather than a blocking option. Now the issue is just seeing the Denver Broncos be willing to add him in as a throw-in. Now he's going to a situation in Seattle. I don't want to say, oh no, Seattle hasn't had a productive tight end in God knows how long. That's not fair because they haven't had a talent like Noah Fant in a very long time. But Russell Wilson, no longer in Seattle. I think this is a very bad landing spot for Noah Fant. And historically speaking, it's not a good sign at all when these teams are willing to move off a player before their second contract. Now, going to round 11, I'm going to have one of my picks on here. I'm going to go with my mistake. I decided to take Rashad White at the 1102. Now, I didn't even need a running back at this point. At this point, I had Dobbins, Kenneth Walker, Travis Etienne on this roster, and we go Rashad White. And if I'm looking back on this, I think the issue is this pick doesn't really make a lot of sense before the NFL draft, before we know if Rashad White's going to go in the top 100 picks of the draft, because I can sit here and I can say, yeah, Rashad White is my running back 4 in this draft class. But if you go to grinding the mocks, if you go to mock draft database, a lot of mock drafters right now have Rashad White as a 4th round NFL draft pick. And if they have Rashad White as a 4th round NFL draft pick, historically speaking, he would compare to someone like Nyheim Hines in the NFL draft with the red flags they would have with a very difficult path to ever really see significant opportunity at the NFL level. I don't see the upside in taking him here over these wide receivers. I think we made the mistake in that Christian Kirk could have a similar ceiling, yet a much higher floor. We could have gone with Rondale Moore. We could have gone Michael Gallup, Brandon Cooks, even Rashad Penny probably would have made a lot more sense. So if Rashad White ends up going at the beginning of the 3rd round of the NFL draft, then I would probably be happy with this pick. And it would probably make sense then. But before we get that security on that draft capital, I feel like this is a selection where I'm only taking risk on and don't have much upside from here. I hope that makes sense. But this Rashad White selection at the 1102, I really do think it's a bad pick. And now going into the 12th round, here there are a couple different ways we could have gone. I hate to do this to Noah, but we're going to go with James Cook at the 1201. I wanted to include my Baker Mayfield pick at the 1207. I'll say real quick, James Cook, very bad pick here at the 1201 in that if you look at his prospect profile, this is a running back that I just think has too many red flags to overcome. I think he's not going to get the Capitals, stayed all 4 years at Georgia, running back that has a BMI under 28. Like really the only running back we've seen find success with that BMI is Kenyon Drake. And I mean, come on, are we that excited about Kenyon Drake? So I think James Cook is the worst pick in this draft, but I do want to dive into my pick in the 12th round as well, because here I decided to take Baker Mayfield. And I think it was another bad pick for me that doesn't really have a path to upside. Now, what I was really hoping for is I was really hoping we were going to get Carson Wentz or Matt Ryan falling to us here in the 12th, because if that were to happen, then all of a sudden we would have been in a position where we get a guaranteed starting quarterback this upcoming season. I mean, in a round that you have James Cook going in front of him, that is extremely valuable. So we had our sights set in on those two QBs. They go the 2 picks before us. I think we just kind of throw our hands up in the air, don't think about it enough. Say, Baker Mayfield probably will have a starting job this upcoming season. Let's just take him here. We wanted Matt Ryan. We wanted Carson Wentz anyway. But if you really sit here and think about it, with Baker, even if he does go and get a starting job this upcoming season, he has a ceiling of being a low-end quarterback 2 in fantasy based on what we have seen from him as a rusher, based on what we have seen with him just completely failing the past 2 seasons. So I don't think it's the worst pick in the round. I definitely hate the Zamir White. I hate the James Cook selections. But with Baker, I think we made the mistake in not adjusting to the draft board when we had our 5 guys in front of us just go snipe, snipe, snipe. I think the Daniel Jones, Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan selections were all great. Those were the guys I wanted, and kind of panicked here with Baker. But of course, thank you so much for checking out the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, letting me know how stupid I am. Subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, and go get our Dynasty Research book on flockfantasy.com, or go get that by depositing on Underdog Fantasy. And when you deposit on Underdog Fantasy with promo code FLOCK, they will match your deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. And on top of that, you'll get that Dynasty Research book. You'll get our Dynasty rankings. You'll get our Dynasty rookie rankings, all up to date for a month over there on Locals. And yeah, that's all I got. Thank you so much again, and I hope that you have a great day.